Minister, my question is very specific, and I'm asking for an update on the status of the state-owned reception and integration centres due to accommodate people coming into our country. I asked this question a quarter of a century, 25 years after direct provision was introduced as a temporary measure. A quarter of a century later, we've had a white paper, we've had the day report, and we still have no state-owned reception centres. If you could give me an update, thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Over the last 6 months, my department has been focused on progressing the new accommodation strategy that I announced at the end of March and the prioritisation of particular elements of the multi-strand approach it set out. So extensive engagement has taken place to identify and negotiate the use of state-owned sites, initially for emergency attempted accommodation and then for longer-term solutions. So to date, 5 sites have been licensed to the department. These include Crooks Lane, River Lodge in Wicklow, Heatherside, Thornton Hall and Lizzie Woolen in Athlone. And tented accommodation has been stood up on the Crooks Lane and River Lodge site, and Thornton Hall will see it in the next number of weeks, and Athlone subsequently. And we've also gotten the use of former Ukrainian accommodation in Ballyogan in South Dublin. The delivery of prefabricated and modular units on state land has been prioritised by my department as a vehicle that can quickly deliver accommodation at national standards. And the first project under this programme is the delivery of 40 modular units to replace tents on the site of Column Barracks in Mullingar. It's currently envisaged that the potential handover of this site will begin in mid-October and will be completed by December. And building on this work, a procurement process to form a framework for the delivery of modular prefabricated units on state land has been launched. We've also set out an expression of interest for people who actually want to sell the state large sites, which can also be used for the accommodation of international protection applicants. So, Deputy, it's a question of meeting an emergency response through tented accommodation on state-owned lands, following that up with the conversion of that tented accommodation to prefabricated units, much more sustainable solution, and then also through the additional capital funding my department has received from the Department of Public Expenditure under the review of the NDP, using that to purchase sites that have been offered on the private market, larger institutional buildings, which can be refurbished and used for international protection accommodation as well.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for that clarification. And I realise you inherited this, so I acknowledge that openly. However, we know for a very long time that direct provision doesn't work. It isolates people, it creates a stigma, and it's inhuman. The High Court recently ruled just in August of this year that the state had utterly failed in its duty to provide for the basic needs, including accommodation for international protection applicants and so on. There's any amount of reports and judgments telling us that this system is just wrong. So can you put your figures in context? I welcome the progress. Can you put it in context for me? What are the numbers in direct provision as we speak? How many are in there who haven't got their full status and have nowhere to go? How many are children? And when will the reception centres be rolled out? Is there a point in time, given that we've had the white paper, the day paper, the McMahon report, or Judge Mahon report, and so on? I don't need to go into the history of it. So if you could just put this progress, I welcome what you're telling me, in context for me. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Deputy. There's one other piece of context I think it's worth noting, and that's the war in Ukraine and the fact that from February 2022, my department had, as well as the work we were doing to deal with the needs of international protection applicants, had to deal with the needs of up to 100,000 Ukrainians and a very significant increase in the level of international applications as well. So just as context, and I know you understand that, right now there's 32,000 people in the international protection system right now. Of those, about, I think, 5,300 have status. We've actually had some real success in terms of supporting people with status to move out of international protection accommodation in the last number of years. About 700 people made that move in 2022. 2,100 made the move in 2023. To date this year, over 4,000 people with status have moved out of the system. And we've done that through targeted supports, working with the Peter McVerry Trust, working with other housing NGOs to make sure people who have status, who have the same right to housing supports as you and I, are able to avail of them and be able to move and live independently within the community.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
it in context for me, Minister, in terms of what state-owned facilities we will have, when we'll have it, and what numbers we're talking about. Unfortunately, you refer to the Peter McVerry Trust, which leaves serious questions to be answered and ongoing investigations into it. And also in the context, we're now at a stage because the successive governments have failed to deal with the problem, and I recognise the influx of people from the Ukraine and the strain that that put on you. But what happened was the narrative changed to say some people coming in good, to put it very simply, other people not so good. And we had a horrible, and remain and still have a horrible discriminatory policy. And that was captured again by the Taoiseach's comments that the impact of people leaving the direct provision or asylum seekers are creating problems for homelessness, which is absolutely misleading, disingenuous and wrong. And the reasons given, that was fourth. The 3 reasons were notices to quit, family separations and other problems. And the direct provision was the least impactful. So for the Taoiseach of the country to perpetuate that narrative is unacceptable. And I would hope, Minister, you would actually disassociate yourself from that and maybe go back to just in your final minute to give me specifics. When will direct provision be ended and provided for in non-profit state accommodation?
Just to respond to Deputy Connolly, the process is to provide a core of 13,000 state-owned beds between now and the end of 2028. That's what's set out in the comprehensive accommodation policy. That is through building on state lands and through purchasing of sites as well, and that will bring us to that at that capacity. I've set out the work we're doing on state land